Leadership is about being able to recognize if we are in a victim mentality, in a mentality where everything from the outside determines our happiness, determines our joy, determines our results, determines our ability to create. But when we move into leadership, and in leadership, we know that we have the ability to create our emotions, our results, our life in general, our destiny. And I'm not taking God out of the picture, but we're not going to talk about this in this particular video. What I like to bring into awareness is what is a victimizer and what is a victimizer. There has to be a victim. And in order to be a victim, there has to be a victimizer. So what are some of the things that we call victimizers? It's very interesting because victimizer number one could be ourselves. We can victimize ourselves with the words we speak, with the way we treat ourselves, with the way we think about ourselves, and the way we feel about ourselves, and anything and everything about our lives. So we sometimes are the worst victimizers. And when we become aware of this, then of course we change the vocabulary, we change the people around us, we change the circumstances because we change ourselves. We become aware. Am I victimizing myself? And how do I get out of it? And how do I value myself? And how do I consider myself worthy? And where does my worthiness come from? Does it come from others, or does it come from within, from the value that I was created with? So that victimizer number one is ourselves. Number two, another victimizer could be institutions, could be the places that we work for. And how do we become aware of whether we are victims or not? Well, look at what happens when you go to work. Are you happily getting up every morning and facing your job responsibilities, or are you dreading going to work? Do you dread talking to principals in the school of your children or your children's school? Do you dread any institution because you don't agree with them, because you don't like the way they operate, because you believe that they are taking advantage of you? That is a victim mentality, but a victimizer, which could be organizations or your job, even your particular place where you spend most of your time. Victimizer number three could be your fears. And this goes together with yourself, with number one, which is yourself. But fears can victimize us. And when we become aware of our fears, and when we look into it and we determine why we are afraid of those fears, then we could stop those fears from running our lives. And instead we face them, or we recognize them and we accept them, and by accepting them they disappear, because fears are only mental. Someone said one time, if I ask you to go and bring me a bucket full of fear, can you pick it up? Well, of course not, because it is only mental. Our fears don't exist out there, they exist in our mind. Victimizer number four, some people are victimized by their history. They will say, oh, this is what happened before. My mother had this, my father had this, my grandparents had this is the way they lived. And, this is passing on. This is a victimizer when someone says, oh, my mother died at 75, my grandfather died at 75, my great-grandfather died at 75, so I'm afraid I might die at 75. But who said that your past determines your future? That is a victimizing belief. That is making your history a victimizer. Watch out for that, because even, and this is an extreme, but medical doctors are now proving that genetics is really a combination of thoughts and conditioning that have been passed through generations. And they're proving this because why is it that there are certain families where sicknesses and illnesses are not passed on because someone broke or took a charge and didn't want to pass on certain beliefs, certain way of behaving, certain conditions. Someone was aware of it and said, no to that. For instance, alcoholism. I know families where a child, one or two children, said, no more alcoholism in my family, and that supposedly genetic illness is not passed on anymore. So our history could be a victimizer if we allow it, or could be a springboard to getting into very different ways of living and lifestyle. And finally, number 5, one that many of my clients talk about, and it is family. I've heard many of my clients saying that the families or their families feel that they own them. And so I have very interesting dialogues with clients who said that they want to be owners of their time, that they want to be owners of their own privacy. They want to be owners of their vision, their purpose, their goals. And we have very long conversations and many questions I ask in regards to how do you make your family part of you, because you don't want to isolate those members who are possibly the greatest support in your life, and yet feel independent and more so interdependent, in where you have a win-win attitude towards your interactions, and where there's synergy, where there's collaboration. Many of my clients said that they find that within their families there's more competition than collaboration, and this is what we're working on through my coaching sessions, is how could we reestablish that focus and that vision of a family, which is to collaborate, to support, to grow, to create synergy, to advance together to very different and specific visions, because I think each member could have their own purpose. In fact, we were very unique. So when we become victim and victimizer is when the rest of the family desires or wants to define and decide what the vision and purpose and goals of each individual are. In other words, let's look at victimizers and victim as a game, and until one or the other become aware of what's happening, and especially when the victim wakes up and says, wait a minute, what kind of a game am I playing here, and wakes up, then the whole role, the interchange doesn't stop. And it's nobody's fault, of course, but it is about awareness. What games are you playing with yourself, with the institutions that are out there in society, with your fears, and within your family? And be aware, because leadership is about responsibility.